was always the Jags.
Always the Jags.
Welcome into Always the Jags. Today we are going to discuss roster cuts, the preseason standouts, all of that as we get ready for the season. Pretty soon, probably like tomorrow in the next couple of days, I'll be dropping my official schedule predictions. What games I think we're going to win, what games we're going to think we'll lose. Because I wanted to do it when the schedule first came out, but I feel like it's a much better time to look at it right now. After the preseason, because you get a better look at all the teams around the league. You know, some things can still happen with trades and stuff. So I think now is the best time to really give like an accurate record prediction before the season starts in September. So for right now, we're going to take a look at some of the preseason standouts from this one. And I think anyone who's watched the preseason knows that like our standouts have got to be the two biggest standouts were Parker Washington and Tank Bigsby. And the reason why that's so encouraging is because that was the issue with our offense last year. We couldn't pick up short yardage when we needed to, which made us predictable and stale on offense and lost us a couple of games that would have been the difference between making the playoffs and not. Literally, a yard was the difference between us winning the division last year and not. And so for Tank Bigsby, but we didn't trust Tank Bigsby on the field. Now he looks strong, tough, fast. Drafting him, I didn't understand why we would spend a third round pick on him when we had a guy like James Washington already and James Robinson, who had already proven himself in his rookie year. But now it looks like that injury that James Robinson had kind of threw off his career, and now he's not nearly the same back. Like he hasn't gotten a starting job anywhere else. It's not like he's lighting it up anywhere else. In retrospect, it kind of makes sense. Tanks Bigsby just kind of needed some time to develop. I still think we didn't necessarily have to take him there. I still think there were better options for us to take, like, again, drafting Darnell Washington. But overall, it looks like it's getting better and getting better. Still haven't seen as much as I'd love to see in like blocking from Brenton Strange. Honestly, I think at this point, Evan Engram is either just as good or better of a blocking tight end than Brenton Strange is, and we drafted Strange to kind of be our blocking tight end. So that's a little not as encouraging. But as far as Tank Bigsby goes, like I said, it looks like he'll be able to be our hammer this year, which is what we needed last year. But looks like he'll be able to do it that year. So that's this year. So that'll be very, very helpful. Kind of take the load off of Travis Etienne a little bit too. And we got this kid, Jaelan Jackson, who is really showing out as another power back. So if Bigsby goes down or if we need to switch it up, I'm sure we can put in Jackson with confidence. And also kind of, like keep Bigsby on his heels, if that makes any sense. Like competition always brings out the best in anybody. And so if Jaelan Jackson ends up making the roster, I think that'll really help because it's like, hey, if Tank Bigsby's not picking up these yards, we'll put this guy in. You know what I mean? But either way, another preseason standout has got to be Parker Washington. I mean, he's really, really stepped up from his punt return that showed incredible. Like the main thing I was amazed at is all the incredible quick startness. Like he was able to make guys miss in the open field, which is a huge, huge trait to have for any slot receiver. So, I think that'll be really effective, and I think he can work really well as Christian Kirk's backup. Because again, if Parker Washington had kind of taken that step last year, or like he could have been the guy behind Christian Kirk. Our offense wouldn't have missed as much when Christian Kirk went down. Now I feel much more comfortable that if Kirk comes down, Parker Washington can step in, and sounds like we won't even miss a beat. Which is really, really nice. He could even maybe take over for Kirk, but I think Kirk has just done so much. I think the Jags are going to end up extending him. So we'll see where all that goes. But at least for right now, it's good to have a reliable receiver on that depth chart who can kind of step up and make those plays when you need them. He still has some mental error things he's got to work on. Like physically, he's gotten a lot better. trusts his hands a lot more. He gets open a lot easier using some of that agility to start and stop. But there's a couple of like sometimes he'll like in the Ravens game, he caught a pass and didn't go out of bounds. Or I don't know if Trevor didn't throw it out of bounds, but like him catching that pass inbounds was the difference between us scoring a touchdown before the half and not scoring, or at least getting 3 points, and that, really changed a lot of the dynamic of that entire game. So, and then this year, there's a couple of times where, like, it was like a 2 minute drill in the preseason. And yeah, I mean, it's just the preseason, but like, rather than catching the ball and going out of bounds like you're supposed to, he tried to turn up field to get a couple extra yards, ended up taking like 15, almost 20 seconds off the clock just to gain 2 more yards, which again, in a 2 minute drill, that's not what you do. You caught the ball. He had enough space to just run out onto the sidelines, like get out of bounds. So I'm like, I don't know if getting out of bounds will always be hard for him to remember. Like that's like, you just got to remember what to do in certain situations. Um, but that issue looks like it hasn't been corrected yet. So hopefully he'll get a lock on that, or we won't be in a situation where he has to get a lock on it. But I mean, you never know. In the NFL, 2 minute drills happen all the time. So those are my two biggest preseason standouts. After the first game, I was going to kind of anoint Cooper Hodges because he was blowing guys up. But then he kind of like settled in, and I mean, not really settled in, but like he didn't really, it seems like that was just a good game for him. The next two games, he didn't really show out as much. Of course, we went undefeated in the preseason. Um, in our last game, we got to see the starters at work, and as predicted, we kind of annihilated the Falcons 31-0. Which again, if we didn't, I would be extremely disappointed because the Falcons were playing not just their second stringers, they're like third stringers, guys that are still trying to make the team. Not a single starter for them. There's like they took out 40 guys. So like if we hadn't scored or anything, it would have been really sad. And the main thing is like you want to like I remember watching that game, and it's funny because like the presenters, you can tell that like this is Falcons football because they were like, wow, the Jaguars, man, if you're a Jaguars fan, you're watching this game, you might be a little concerned because you're not really moving the ball against these Falcons as with as much ease as you thought. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's still an NFL scheme. It's still guys like it's still a scheme from a professional NFL coordinator who's throwing his guys at you in the best way that he can to try to make your guys miss. So, you're not going to get like it's not just going to be chunk play, chunk play, chunk play, touchdown when you're going against second stringers. It's like the bottom line is you like if Trevor Lawrence was playing against someone's backups, I would expect every drive led by Trevor Lawrence to end in a touchdown. That's exactly what happened. It was a little bit tougher sometimes. I would have liked to see more running lanes being opened and more plays kind of being made with the offense versus a bunch of backups because the competition is only going to get stiffer. But if you're like, what could they have done better than score a touchdown on each of their drives? I mean, that's the best that you could do in the NFL. So the offense looked efficient. It looked capable. Trevor Lawrence looked poised. He had a little more time in the pocket. It wasn't like a crazy amount of protection, but the difference of having Mitch Morse compared to Luke Fortner is huge. Mitch Morse isn't the best center in the league, but he's not the worst center in the league, which will make a big difference in the amount of time. And that difference could be an extra second or two, but that extra second or two is the difference between getting sacked and getting a 15-yard pickup. Really love to see the chemistry of with Evan Engram and Trevor Lawrence. And I really like the way that we're starting to use Evan Ingram's height and weight as more of a red zone threat. Because as you see, he caught those 2 touchdowns. That's really encouraging. I think that's something that needs to continue because Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of the big play threat. He's not as much as a red zone threat. And Gabe Davis can kind of be a red zone threat, but like they haven't developed that chemistry yet. With Evan Engram, we just never really used him as like that guy to watch for in the end zone. You know what I mean? Like he never really was that. He's kind of just been like the guy over the middle, hit him over the middle, let him kind of do yards after catch, things like that, which he's obviously still excellent at. But if he adds red zone, to his red zone target, guy that you put the ball up and he can just go up and outbox guys and gets it, that will make our offense that much more dangerous because we had a lot of struggles in the red zone. And if Trevor has a go-to guy, that means, and it starts showing up on tape, teams are going to try to take him away, which means it's going to open up things. If you have to double team Evan Engram in the red zone, because Trevor Lawrence threw a touchdown while Evan Engram had two guys on him, and he went up and beat both of them to get it. Now, again, these were second stringers, but if you've got a double team Evan Engram in the red zone, okay, who's going to block Travis Etienne? Who's going to block Gabe Davis? Who's going to block Brian Thomas Jr.? Who's going to block Christian Kirk? So once you start, like, if teams have to start looking at it that way, like, okay, we got to double team Evan Engram, otherwise he's going to win. When we get into the red zone, now you just have options, and now it's just pick your poison kind of offense. So that's the kind of thing that we kind of want to see developed and keep going. So it's encouraging. You can't look at it too much because, again, it is against second stringers. Preseason really doesn't matter, but we can come away saying, hey, what needed to happen was supposed to happen. And if you look at it, like, our depth, like, thoroughly beat the Falcons' depth because, again, the starters didn't play the whole game. So when it came down to our third stringers, guys that were barely clinging onto a roster spot playing against their third stringers, we still kept beating them up and down the field, 31-0. So, I mean, it just shows that, like, our guys, like, they didn't score anything. They were completely shut out. So, and again, it just shows that we have a lot of, I think we have some good depth in some areas. I think the area that still worries me the most is probably cornerback, because I feel like if Tyson Campbell misses a game, we could easily lose that game. Like, depending on who we're going against, if they have any kind of receivers, we're going to be absolutely messed up because we have Ronald Darby and then some guys that have like I don't see Ronald Darby being able to mess up your top receiver, right? He's just not that kind of guy. He's an average cornerback 2. And so if you put him on their top receiver is probably going to be able to get open. And then the rest of our guys will have to go against the second stringers, the wide receiver 2, and our backups for the cornerback spot just don't seem like they're that solidified. Like Christian Braswell, I was going to name him one of the standouts because he had a really good preseason, made a couple of nice plays. There's one play where he let a guy beat him, and then he went back and snatched the ball, and that was a touchdown. So the fact that they ruled that incomplete, that play is probably what saved his roster spot, even though that play technically didn't happen. And so that might have given him the spot over Buster Brown, who, had some starting experience last year. And then we've got DeAndre Prince and Jarian Jones, who have showed some things in the preseason, had a good camp, but they're rookies, still very unproven, late round rookies that are probably going to have a spot because they were drafted. And it's like, we don't want to give up on them too early. So that's a lot to ask for a bunch of rookies and second string players to be going up against veterans, veteran wide receivers that they're going to have to cover. So I still would love to see us, try to make a move for, it probably won't happen until like the midseason if we see this as an issue, but making a move for Marshawn Lattimore, I think would definitely be kind of like the cherry on top that kind of makes this work. Even if it costs like Cam Robinson, I feel like I'd be willing to do that because I think our offensive line tackle depth feels very good. I think Walker Little makes a great swing tackle, but I think Blake Hance can be that swing tackle. He had a great camp, and so did Cole Van Lanen. And they're both ahead of Javon Foster. So it's kind of like, if you want to give Javon Foster another chance, Walker Little can start and play just as effective as Cam Robinson. I guess the issue is still the running game. Like, is Walker Little as good as Cam Robinson in the running game? And we still don't really know because Cam Robinson has a nasty streak that he plays with that I don't know if anyone else on the offensive line has it. So we'll have to really, really, really see about that. But overall, I think there's a good chance we will. There's a good chance. I think that would kind of be the missing piece that we need with getting a guy like Marshawn Lattimore or just another veteran cornerback in that room. So I don't think the Jaguars are done making moves. I would still like to see us bring in like a third pass rusher, like again a guy like what was his name? He played with Ryan Nielsen in Atlanta. the name is so escaping me. He was with the Titans, started with the Steelers, and then he ended up eventually I'll think of it. But he was like a third pass rusher guy. I think he ended up signing with the Chargers, and he got a pretty good deal for the Chargers. I don't think I would have paid him that much to come to Jacksonville, so it probably was for the best that we didn't end up getting him. But another guy that's kind of like, if we can find another guy that's kind of been cast out, like people have been talking like Hassan Reddick, he would be a great trade for if he didn't want a new contract, because now he wants to be paid like 25 to 28 million a year. We already paid our guy 30 million. We're not going to pay Hassan Reddick 25 to 28 million. And he's not like declining, but he's not ascending either. So I think that would be kind of rich for our blood, so we probably won't end up doing that. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the roster cutdowns and who I think is going to end up making the final roster. It's happening right now as we speak. So this video, by the time it comes out, the roster will probably already be cut down. So you just have to go back and look to see if I was correct. But for right now, quarterbacks, pretty easy. We're going to keep 2 on the roster: Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones. Mac Jones had a really, really good preseason. I think he made some like really, really bad mistakes at times. But he bounced back from them quite nicely. And so based upon his play, like there was never any question whether the starter was going to be Trevor or Mac anyway. But I feel like it's solidified that he's going to be a backup. And if Trevor, like God, hopefully we never see him. But if we do, Mac Jones can, I think a healthy Mac Jones will be better than an injured Trevor. You know, like last year, an injured Trevor was still better than CJ Beathard. But now, if Trevor is hurt and it's affecting his play, we can put Mac Jones in with confidence that our offense will keep rolling. So I think that will make a difference. I think CJ Beathard will go to the practice squad. He could get signed up by somebody, and it would be sad to see him go because he's been such a good veteran for Trevor. But chances are he'll be on the practice squad, and if another team snatches him up, we'll just have to let him go. But our backups are definitely, it's definitely Trevor and Mac. I probably didn't even need to talk that long about it because it's pretty cut and dry. Wide receivers. So here we have the first 5, I feel like, are completely locked in. Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., another standout from the preseason. Wanted to see big things from him. That's exactly what we saw from that 40-yard contested catch. I'm glad they kept him in a little bit longer in that first preseason game because I really wanted to see more from him. And then connecting with Trevor Lawrence on that 38-yard pass, that was gorgeous. Again, against backups, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but still exactly what you want to see from the guys that are going to be on the field on Sunday with your starting offense. So, yeah, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Devin Duvernay made some pretty good plays, and he's going to be one of our punt and returners. And then Parker Washington. The last receiver spot is really kind of up for grabs, and it's going to come down to special teams. And because of that, I think it's still going to be Tim Jones. Elijah Cooks, I think, made more plays than Tim Jones, and I think the same thing for Austin Trammell, who actually made some really nice plays in the preseason. But I think it's because Tim Jones, I think the Jaguars kind of know that Tim Jones is locked in because he's such a core special teamer that if Elijah Cooks and Trammell wanted to make the roster, they needed to make plays on special teams, and they didn't really make the plays that they needed to make on special teams. So I think Tim Jones is kind of more locked in than we think. And I think that battle was just to decide if we're going to keep a 7th receiver or not. And so I could see us going with Cooks as our 7th receiver and then trying to keep Trammell on the practice squad. Because again, they made some nice plays, but I also don't think that both of those guys are in danger, because part of why you have the practice squad too is like to make sure guys don't get in danger of getting snatched up, right? So like you need your special teamers to be on the roster because they play on the field on special teams, which are going to be even more important now with the new kickoff rules. So you got to have Tim Jones on your roster, even if you're not worried about another team snatching him up. So I feel like having a 7th wide receiver spot would only be if Jacksonville was like, man, Cooks and Trammell played so well, we're afraid of another team signing them off our practice squad, which I honestly don't think I worry too much about. So I would probably just go with these 6 receivers if it was me. I think running backs, I think I would like to keep 4 running backs just because I really like the way Jalen Jackson played. Um, and again, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, are you worried that he gets signed off your roster? Keelan Robinson, I think, is going to injured reserve. So I think he'll be on injured reserve. But Travis Etienne, Tank's Bigsby, and Dearness Johnson, I feel like are pretty much locked in. Tank definitely solidified himself as the number 2 running back this year. But I think Jalen Jackson deserves to have that 4th spot. And then if Keelan Robinson comes off of injured reserve, you can sign Jackson to your practice squad and elevate Robinson if he's ever becomes ready at this point. So I think I would probably keep 4 running backs. I think the reason why I'd rather keep 4 is especially because if Jackson and Johnson, I think I would like to see a little bit more from Tank Bigsby in pass protection. And I think Jackson actually played a little, he was able to pick up some stunts in pass protection. Like guys were blitzing, he was able to pick it up, pretty well. So I think that would make the difference between me having 7 receivers versus 3 running backs. I think I would rather have a running back who can be there next to Trevor, who could also pick up a stunt, pick up a blitzing, pick up a nickel corner, because like there was a couple of times where there was a nickel corner coming off the edge and Travis Etienne just got knocked over because he's a shifty back. He's very shifty. Tank Bigsby can blow that nickel corner right off of Trevor, right? And keep him from getting there. So that's the kind of that to me, that's the mindset and difference why I kind of want to have nice 2 power backs, um Tank Bigsby and Jalen Jackson, just for that reason of protecting Trevor, having another guy there who can pick up a blitz. I think tight ends, Josiah DeGuara made a really good case because he made some really good catches. But I think he'll be safe on our practice squad. I think Evan Engram, Brenton Strange, and Luke Farrell are going to be the guys. And it's mainly because Brenton Strange and Luke Farrell are better blockers and they can still catch. So Josiah DeGuara is not a bad blocker, but because Strange and Farrell are better and they can still, catch and get open, you can kind of, when they're in the game, teams are going to think that we're running. And so if we do a trick play, Farrell and Strange are still savvy enough to get open and catch that pass. And of course, Evan Engram is, the best tight end on the roster by far. Probably going to ascend to one of the top ones in the league. I wouldn't be surprised with the way he seems to continue to elevate his game. So I think it's going to be 3 tight ends: Evan Engram, Brenton Strange, and Luke Farrell. Offensive lineman, this one's a little tough because I think we might end up going with 10. I think we want to go with 10 because and it's like you got to have your best guys. So that's why I think trading Cam Robinson and again, you could also trade Walker Little. I just think if you're going to trade Walker Little or Cam Robinson, you should trade the guy that's going to free you up some cap space and trade him to get another player. Because right now, technically, we have 6 starters, it feels like, because Walker Little is good enough to start, and he's proven that over and over again. So anyway, let me go through the list. So it'll be Cam Robinson, Ezra Cleveland, Mitch Morse, Brandon Scherff, Anton Harrison, Walker Little, Javon Foster, Cooper Hodges, and Luke Fortner. But I think we're also going to add Cole Van Lanen as well as Blake Hance. And that would bring us to, I did my math wrong. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, that would be not, so that would be 11 if we wanted to keep Blake Hance and Cole Van Lanen. And so where the issue kind of lies is Javon Foster didn't have a great camp or a great preseason, and you don't feel good about putting him in. He's more developmental than we were probably expecting, picking him in the 4th round. Like for someone to be that developmental where like you don't really feel comfortable playing them even in a backup setting, like they're not ready, you probably would want to pick them in like the 6th or the 7th round, and then they're just trying to fight to make the roster. But it looks like, they want to give him time to develop because he's got the traits. He's just not really ready to be out on an NFL field. But you drafted him, right? And so like Blake Hance and Cole Van Lanen regularly outplayed him during the season. And it's like if any of your guys get hurt, if Cole Van Lanen and Blake Hance make it to they're not going to make it to the practice squad. Basically, if they get waived, that's it. They're gone. Javon Foster might make it. I mean, another team might pick him up because again, offensive tackle play is very, very shoddy right now, and a lot of teams need it. So I think it's really hard to decide this one. I think if it was me as the GM, I would look into, could I get Marshawn Lattimore for Cam Robinson? And then I would keep 10 guys, and that would be, so Walker Little will be my starting left, and then Cleveland, Mitch Morse, Brandon Scherff, Anton Harrison. And then I keep Javon Foster, keep Cooper Hodges, keep Luke Fortner, and then Cole Van Lanen and Blake Hance. Because Blake Hance is nice too, because he can play multiple positions along the line. Because if you look at our guards, Brandon Scherff gets hurt pretty often. Ezra Cleveland was out for a few games. And so who do we have to back him up? Just Cooper Hodges. I mean, we could try Luke Fortner at guard, but he's more just the backup center. So you kind of need to have Blake Hance on there because he can play guard too, just not as well as he can play tackle. But you still need someone that you trust to be in there in case one of those guys get hurt, and those guys get hurt often. So I think if I'm looking at that, if I know Foster can only play tackle, you've got Foster and Cole Van Lanen, two guys who can only play tackle, backing up Robinson and Harrison, in addition to Walker Little. So you have 3 backups for your 2 tackles, but you only have 1 backup for your 2 guards. So that's kind of the idea that I would win. If you don't end up trading Cam Robinson, I probably pick Blake Hance over Cole Van Lanen just because of position flexibility. But I also think you might end up just sending Javon Foster to the practice squad. And because again, getting cut doesn't mean that you're not going to be on the team ever again. So it's not going to be like a wasted 4th round pick. It's just let him keep developing on the practice squad. If he gets picked up by another team, that happens. But I think we end up keeping 10 offensive linemen. So like I said, I think I would take Blake Hance over Cole Van Lanen just for position flexibility. Even though Van Lanen outplayed him at tackle based upon position flexibility and what I have on my roster, I need Blake Hance. So I think I would pick him over Van Lanen if that's what it came down to. But again, I would probably look into, can I trade Cam Robinson? And then I'll keep Foster kind of like as a developmental prospect on that team. Because you can also develop, I feel like being on the roster helps you develop as well. Um, some guys can develop from the practice squad, but it's a little bit different when you can be called out there for game action, or something like that. So that's kind of who, because like you could put him in on not really special teams, but like if you're kicking off or something like that, there are ways that you could get Foster like snaps during the regular season to kind of help jumpstart his development. Because again, we're kind of looking at it as maybe he could be the guy to take over. And if we're not sure if he's going to make the roster, that means we're probably going to need to look into keeping Robinson or Little at some point. So, and if we trade Cam Robinson, no, we wouldn't get a so like if they both signed somewhere else, we would get a comp pick. But if we trade him, we wouldn't get a comp pick. So again, I think Cam Robinson trading him only makes sense if you bring in another player. I don't think bringing in a draft pick, because you probably won't get a third, and that would be the compensatory pick if he signs somewhere else. So yeah, I don't think you would get a third. And so if you could bring in a player, though, I think that would make a big difference. The Saints' offensive line has tons of issues. And they ended up drafting another cornerback instead of another offensive lineman. Could be a match made, could be a equal trade opportunity for both parties. So defensive linemen, moving on. So we have a lot of great guys in the alignment. I'll just kind of combine it as all into 10, because I think a lot of people are thinking Arik Armstead is going to want to play big end sometimes. And I agree with that. I think that'll be a good way to switch it up. But the thing is, I want to make sure our best 3 guys are on the field at all times. So if we're going to do that, I think we need to make sure, like, if Arik Armstead is giving Trayvon Walker a breather, that's fine. But Trayvon Walker shouldn't become like the backup to Arik Armstead, if that makes sense. Or Arik Armstead shouldn't be the backup to Trayvon Walker, because we're not paying him that kind of money to back up Trayvon Walker. So like, on first and second down, because Arik Armstead, he needs to help us in the run defense because he's really good at that. So like first and second down, stop the run, and then you can just swap them. Let Armstead move to big end if you get them in third and long, and let Trayvon Walker move inside. That would be, pretty fun stunts and stuff you can do to kind of switch them out, give them a breather on second down or some other way to switch around. I'm just like, I don't want the situation to become Trayvon Walker or Arik Armstead. Like they got to be on the field at the same time. And Arik Armstead is like, I think he's going to end up playing like what I would do is like on first downs, running plays, Arik Armstead plays defensive line. And then if we get them into third and long, put him at big end, let Trayvon Walker move inside because again, Trayvon Walker has violated some guards before, and I think he can play really well on the inside and get to the quarterback still. So with all that being said, we'll kind of combine the defensive line into one big pot. So obviously it would be Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, Arik Armstead, Devon Hamilton. Hopefully he's a little bit more removed from that injury. Robertson-Harris, I think we'll end up keeping him. He kind of ended up playing with like the 2s and the 3s, so people were like wondering, like, is he going to make the roster? I think with all the money that we're paying him, yeah. I think he could have been a good trade candidate potentially after drafting, Maason Smith and Jordan Jefferson. But we'll probably just keep him on the roster, especially if Arik Armstead wants to play some big end. Travis Gibson already got traded to the Seahawks, so he won't be on the team. So likely, I think I think Miles Cole has shown a lot in the preseason. He's made some pretty nice plays, and he's got the length that we're kind of looking for. So I think they're thinking he can be just as effective as that third guy. So that'll give him some time to develop. So I think he'll come in. I think we're gonna stick with Jeremiah Ledbetter. I think Tyler Lacey will get another shot. He hasn't really shown as much, for a developmental prospect to make the roster, but I think we'll still see him on there. And then our 2 rookies, Maason Smith and Jordan Jefferson. And I think I just mentioned Jeremiah Ledbetter, but he's got a lot of experience, and I think that's going to kind of keep him on the roster because I think we'll prefer not to have to put him in, but if we do, we know he can at least, perform, pretty well and do what needs to be done on the field because again, he has a lot of experience and he started before. He's just, not as fast as he used to be. So I think that'll be our 10 guys. So instead of Travis Gibson, it'll pretty much be Miles Cole. So Armstead, Hamilton, Robertson-Harris, Hines-Allen, Walker, Lacey, Smith, Jefferson, Cole, and Jeremiah Ledbetter. DJ Coleman was showing a lot. I think we'll probably end up signing him to the practice squad, or he might beat out Tyler Lacey. I could see that as well. Either guys don't feel like a risk to leave to another team, so I think either one would be fine. It just kind of depends on, I think the final spot would come down to Lacey versus Coleman, because I think Cole has shown enough to solidify a spot on the roster. So now we have linebackers. Foye Oluokun and Devin Lloyd are obviously the starters. Chad Muma's become a core special teams guy and a good backup. Ventrell Miller has shown a lot more, so I think he'll end up being on that linebacker spot. And then some people are wondering if we're going to keep 2 or if we're going to keep 5 linebackers or 6 linebackers. Caleb Johnson is another guy who's kind of become a core special teamers. So even though he plays linebacker, we'll probably have him. So like we don't really need him as a 5th linebacker, but we'll probably end up having him because Caleb Johnson has just been, like I said, that core special teamer. So he's probably pretty much a lock to make the roster as well. So with the linebackers, the biggest cut is probably going to end up, I think I would only keep 5 because Ventrell Miller isn't really a core special teamers. I mean, not Ventrell Miller. Yasir Abdullah isn't really a core special teamers, and he's no longer, rushing the passer. He's trying to play linebacker. So I think we can keep him on the practice squad, let him learn linebacker a little bit more, see how he does. So I'd probably only go with 5 linebackers because I feel like I need more depth at cornerback than I do at linebacker. And I think he can be safely stashed on the practice squad. So moving on to our cornerbacks, this one is a little bit different because we signed Darnell Savage, who, traditionally played safety, but he's going to be playing cornerback. So I think for here, though, I would keep 6 cornerbacks again, because potentially I might be potentially I might be looking to make a move. So 6 cornerbacks. So that would be, I mean, you could even keep 7 really. But that would be, if we keep 6, that would be Tyson Campbell, Ronald Darby as our starters. Jerry Jones is probably going to, I think he was battling with Darnell Savage for who's going to man the slot. But again, he's a 3rd round pick, so he's probably going to make the roster. He made some nice plays in the preseason, still needs some development time. So I think I'd rather see a veteran like Savage starting, but Jerry Jones will make the roster as well. DeAndre Prince is another very, very developmental guy. If Monteric Brown, I think Monteric Brown and Christian Braswell are the last guys to kind of make this roster. And so if I did it that way, that would be 6 cornerbacks: Tyson Campbell, Ronald Darby, Jerry Jones, DeAndre Prince, Monteric Brown, and Christian Braswell. Brown has some starting experience, but again, Braswell also showed a lot in the preseason, which makes me think that he could be a good guy to keep. And this would still leave room for Marshawn Lattimore if we brought him in. So if I did this, I'd be doing 6 cornerbacks, right? But offensive linemen, I would be doing 11 if for my cut down, and then I try to see if the Saints, if I can trade Cam Robinson for Marshawn Lattimore, bring him into the cornerback room, now we'd have 7 cornerbacks and 10 offensive linemen. So that's probably how the last roster spot would come down to me. And then when we have safeties, Andre Sisco and Antonio Johnson are going to be the starters. Daniel Thomas is a very, very core special teams guy. Right now, Andrew Wingard is on injured reserve, so we'll probably put him on injured reserve, and Tashawn Gibson is suspended, so he doesn't count against our roster. So we can leave them both off of this list for now. So I think because of that, because Tashawn Gibson is suspended for the first 6 games as well. So if Andrew Wingard's on injured reserve and Tashawn Gibson is suspended, Daniel Thomas, core special teamers, got to keep him. I think I would keep Darnell Savage, but as a safety, because I know he can play safety as well as nickel. So he can be the backup safety and also be the starting nickel. So if, Andre Sisco or Antonio Johnson goes down, I can move Savage out to safety, take their spot, and put Jerry Jones in at nickel, as the rookie playing the nickel cornerback spot. So that's probably how I would do it if I was choosing who to keep and who to cut. Terrell Edmonds had a lot of like hard hitting plays. He laid guys out kind of. But like he didn't show a whole lot in coverage. So like, once the guy's caught the ball, we know he can tackle him, which is a very important skill, but it's also like you gotta be able to cover him and keep him from catching it in the first place. So I think that's why Terrell Edmonds will end up not making the roster. Trey Flowers was another tough cut because he's made some pretty good plays and he's had a really good preseason record. So he'd be a wonderful practice squad stash if possible. Like I said, it's funny because it's like it feels like we need cornerback help, but we have all these cornerbacks, right? And it's like it's just because we don't have the top flight guys. We don't have L'Jarius Sneed, who we could have traded for, or someone like that. Because again, Ronald Darby would make an excellent backup to a duo of Tyson Campbell and Marshawn Lattimore. Like Ronald Darby could step in, you're not even worried. And again, because all 3 of those guys have been hurt so much, like we committed a lot to Tyson Campbell too, but it also feels like you kind of need someone to back them up because they've all been hurt a lot, and Marshawn Lattimore's been hurt a lot. So I feel like I don't feel prepared if Tyson Campbell goes down. I feel like our roster is not prepared unless we bring someone else in. Now, one of the rookies maybe would start flashing or something like that, but I don't feel prepared. Specialists, Logan Cook, Cam Little, Ross Mastick, not really hard. Cam Little took the starting job and proved he deserved it in the preseason. I think the only kick he missed was like a 62-yarder. So, and it had the length, it just didn't have the aim. So that's something he can, if he gets to the point where he can kick 62-yarders, we have a very good kicker on our hands. That's all I got to say. So that's kind of my roster prediction. Let me know your thoughts. Who you think is going to make the roster by the time I put this out? Like I said, we'll probably have the roster cut down, and we'll see if the Jags make any big moves. My thing is, I think they also kind of agree on the cornerback front, and they'll be looking out to the preseason, see if there's any guys as teams cut down the roster. Because like for the Saints, I mean, I don't know how their backup position goes. They're probably going to want to keep Lattimore because he's probably better than a lot of their backups. But if they like what they're seeing from their rookie, and they know they need offensive line help, I mean, that could be enticing to them. Even I'd be willing to send a fourth rounder for Lattimore. But if we could do it straight up for Robinson, I think that's a good trade and a good indication of the win now front. So let me know your thoughts on the roster cut down. Pretty soon I'll do my schedule predictions, what games I think the Jaguars are going to win and potentially lose. And yeah, and remember, it was always the Jags.